Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I am back with some more Esoterica. Today we're going to be diving back into the Initiates of the Flame. It is a guidebook. It appears to be for the Masons. I'm not sure of the entire history of it. I didn't even read all that. So we're reading through and seeing what we can extract from it that is useful knowledge. I have already helped quite a few people apparently. Y'all like what I'm doing here, and so we are definitely going to continue it. If you have other volumes that you would like me to cover in the same manner, let me know in the comments down below so that I can get to what y'all want to see. With that being said, we are going to dive in and pick up where we left off in Chapter 5 of the Initiates of the Flame. This is the Ark of the Covenant. This is the picture that begins it, the priest before the Ark of the Covenant, and the Spirit over the mercy seat. Let's go. Chapter 5, the Ark of the Covenant. Let me get my glasses. One of the most interesting symbols that has come down to us from the ancients is that of the Ark, or the box that was said to contain the sacred relics. Many people believe that this belongs particularly to the Jewish nation, but this is a great mistake, because it has been the birthright of every country to have the Ark. All have, like the Jewish people, lost much of their power and glory when they lost the sacred Ark. In ancient Chaldea and Phoenicia, the Ark was well known. India celebrates it as the lotus, and in ancient Egyptians tell how the moon god Osiris was imprisoned in an ark. In all the mystery religions of the world, individually and cosmically, the ark represents the fountainhead of wisdom. Over it, the Shekinah's glory hovers, as a column of flames by night and a pillar of smoke by day. Every country has seen and felt its presence when the priests, kings, and initiates bring out of an old civilization, lost because of crystallization, the sacred ark, and surrounded by those faithful to the truth, carry it into other lands and among other peoples. In every creed and religion we find crystallization. We find small groups of people separating themselves from their brother man. We find those who, clinging to the old, refuse to advance with the new. And whenever we find this crystallization, we find the spirit of truth carried away to other people and embodied in other doctrines. The ancient ark of the Israelite never had removed from it the staves by which it was carried and moved, until finally it was placed in Solomon's temple. Neither does the spirit fire in man rest until finally it is enthroned in the holy place of his solar temple. Ever towards the rising sun, its bearers carry the sacred truth. Nations are born of those who love the truth and are buried when they forget it. The time has come when its silent bearers have taken the sacred ark and the Shekinah's glory, and in solemn file have removed across the waters and brought it to the new world. The call has sounded through the universe, and those who are true to their own higher principles have surrounded the sacred chest. Those who have sworn alliance to their own higher being are following the priests and their sacred burden, and a beautiful mystery temple is being built in this beautiful land of ours, loved and guarded by those who are laboring for humanity. The staves are still in the ark, however, and only when real good can be done by it will it remain. The opportunity is now confronting the Western world. The knowledge of the ancients, the wisdom of the ages, is knocking at the door and seeking those who will follow it. The bearers of the ark have stopped and are gathering a nucleus of spiritual souls to carry on their work. And whether or not the word of the Lord will remain with a nation depends upon its own actions, and the actions of a nation are the collective actions of its individuals. If it finds nothing here attuned to itself, if it finds few that will answer its call, the call of service and brotherhood, then will its priests lift again the staves, and the sacred work will go out into other lands. The life of a country thus gone, like the ancient city of the Golden Gate, it will be swallowed up in oblivion. The call is sounding, and those who love the truth and think and care for the light must join that band of servers who have, for centuries, dedicated themselves to the preservation of truth. Their lives they have given 1,000 times. Their happiness has been second to their duty. They are the keepers of the sacred word, and the law of attraction draws to them all who love and live the truth. A great influx of spiritual light comes to those who live the life and have learned the doctrine. And regardless of clan or country, they have joined the silent file of watchers and workers around the sacred Ark of the Covenant. Every individual, by his daily actions, is expressing more plainly than by words his ideals, his desires, and his attitude towards this great work. The composite attitude of a certain number of people either shuts out or lets in the light. Therefore, every individual has a great duty. A great work has to be done, and to that the true student must dedicate his life. Then, wherever he may go, whatever he may do, he is being led, and Shekinah's glory directs his footsteps. The rod that budded, the pot of manna, and the tablets of the law. In these three things contained within the ark, we see the threefold spirit contained within the man's body. In the brain of a man, between the wings of the kneeling cherubim, is the mercy seat. And there man speaks to his God, and the priest of the tabernacle spoke to the Spirit of the Lord, hovering between the wings of the angels. Man is again the ark, and within him are the three principles, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the tablets of the law, the pot of manna, and the rod that budded. But as in the case of the ancient Israelites, when they became crystallized, the pot of manna and the rod that budded were removed from the ark, and all that was left were the tablets or the letter of the law. When the individual crystallizes and excludes various sidelights from his mind, he excludes the life force which was flowing to him. In shutting out strangers, he shuts out his own life, and all that he has left are the tablets of the law, the material reasons from which the spiritual life has gone. Solomon's temple, or the perfected temple of the human body, the perfected temple of the universe, and the perfected temple of the soul, finally forms the perfect shrine for the living ark. There, at the head of a great cross, it is placed, and there, in man, it becomes permanently fixed. The staves of polarity upon which it was carried are removed, and it becomes a living thing, a permanent place where man converses with his God. There, man, the purified priest, arrayed in the robes of his order, the garments of his soul, converses with the Spirit hovering over the mercy seat. This ark, within, is always present, but man can only reach it after he has passed through the outer court of the tabernacle, after he has passed through all the degrees of initiation, and after he has taken the third degree and becomes a grand master. Then, and only then, can he enter into the presence of his Lord, and there, in the darkened chamber, lighted by the jewels of his own breastplate, he converses with the Most High, the true spiritual essence within himself. We are working towards this, and the time will come when each person for himself will know the mystery of the ark, when the student, through purification, shall be led through the door of the Holy of Holies, and there be enveloped by the light of truth. This was his birthright, which he sold for a mess of pottage. To this end came he into the world, that he might bear witness to this truth, that through this light all men might be saved. The ark, that great spiritual principle, surrounded by its loving workers, is calling all to follow it. When through materiality and degeneracy a great people are destroyed, or a continent sinks beneath the ocean, then those that are true, are called around the ark, and as its faithful servers are led out of the land of darkness into the new world and a promised paradise. All great teaching set forth the same thing. The student will find that it is true, and when he allies himself with the powers of light, when he becomes a channel for its expression, and when he radiates it from himself to all who need it, then indeed will the light protect him, and he shall become a son of God. The Holy Grail. See in this cup your own body, within which is the lifeblood of the Sun Spirit of the universe. Each day that we live, we perpetuate the Last Supper, and in all that we do, we drink again the blood of Christ, the life power of the cosmos. And so ends chapter 5, and this is an interesting one, because it contains both truth and untruth. We're going to talk about it real quick. If you are unaware, I have done a Bible study. It will be linked up here. It's called an unconventional Bible study. There is also an unconventional New Testament. And in that, we discovered a lot of things. And one of the things that we talked about in the book of Exodus was extensively the Ark of the Covenant and what it represented to the Jewish people, what exactly it was, and it did not contain the budded staff. Didn't happen, right? What was the other one that they said was in it? The only thing that was in there, right? The pot of manna was not, the rod that budded was not. The tablets of the law kinda was, kinda wasn't. If you go back and you watch this study, which you probably won't, but there was a covenant made. It was signed in blood. They touched their ear with blood. They touched their feet with blood. There was a whole thing that happened. It was the left side, my bad. And it was before the law. Before the law was a covenant that these people signed in blood, and it was that, the testimony that went inside the box, right? Not the law, although that was put in there later. What was originally in the box was the covenant with the leaders of Israel, signed in blood in front of the demon that was giving them these powers, right? The ark, in my estimation, as we went through it, I talked about it a lot. I have a conspiratorial mind. I believe in things that other people don't. And I do believe that this was a physical thing, that it was something that they built using higher knowledge that is not part of what we have today. There was a thing called the shamir. And if you don't know what the shamir is, it is a tool. It is for directing the energy that is created, stored, and amplified inside the ark. The entire tabernacle was a static electricity generation machine. The ark was a concentration machine, and the shamir was the way that you directed that. We talked about that a lot, so I'm not going to talk about that any more than I just did. If you are curious, you can definitely go back and check out the Unconventional Bible Study, where I have stepped on an enormous amount of toes, and while it is not intentional, I do not apologize for the way that played out. But there is something here, right? They are trying quite desperately to link some things that don't have to be linked because of the times, right? This was written in the early 1900s. This was right about the time that we started having the break, where it became acceptable again to talk about esoterica, to talk about the greater mysteries, to talk about the things. And not only that, it became somewhat hyped up around this time. And there was a great reconciliation taking place. Now, I have to assume that this cannot be entirely Masonic because it references Jesus in here, and the Masons don't do that. They talk about God, they talk about the architect, they talk about the creator, but they don't talk about the person that was here to do the thing. You have access to things. One of those things is what they're trying to intimidate here, right? The third eye. That's what they're calling the ark. The third eye is available to you. It is something that you can use, but it's going to take some work. It is not something that you just get automatic access to. It is something that you have to learn. You have to pray, fast, and meditate in order to activate it. You have to learn to channel the energies within yourself. You have to learn how to direct it in a very precise manner in order to break the block that it is on your third eye. Now, I can't talk for other people with theirs, but with mine, that is how I I spent a lot of time this weekend trying to think about how I became aware of the subtle energy, right? And it was because, in large part, of me, I learned how to move the energies within myself, but to see the subtle fields outside of myself, that didn't happen until after I had broken the block on my third eye. And that was by pulling the energy through my stack, right? Pulling it from the base and shoving it through my third eye and creating things. I've talked about that already, and we will talk about that again, but what they're talking about here is the awakening of the third eye. It is the reconciliation of all things. And it tells you in here that you have to meditate for this. It tells you that it is not just going to pop up, but that you have to seek it out, that you have to be intentional about it. Now, I have to caveat this with the warning. You should definitely check out the 8 Laws of Creation, because if you do the things, you can do it for good or for bad, right? I don't want to really use evil in this context, but it is a thing, right? You can affect positive and negative. You can do light and dark. You can do growth, and destruction. You need to make sure that you are doing the correct things, right? I'm not here to tell you what the correct things are. God does that. I'm here to let you know that there are 8 laws of creation, and these 8 laws of creation are the things that govern what will happen to you and the external effects if you try to do the things that I talk about. You should definitely check out that video. What else did I need to talk about in here? Oh, again, there is no need for salvation in this manner. The only thing that needed to happen was for you to turn to God. We have talked about that extensively. And so, in order for this to happen, you don't have to be initiated into some secret club, right? They talk here about, well, only after you have taken the 3rd degree and become a grandmaster. That is not true. That is not true. You can do all kinds of things without taking the proper steps. It is not advised at all, but you can do it. And it has nothing to do with you swearing some oath to not reveal secrets or riding a goat or any of the various things that are attached to this, right? I'm not trying to get into any of the conspiracies about the Masons in this, because that is another overstated thing. But this is a club, and this club figured out something, and they figured out a way to pass that information on, and that's what this is. Now, they are not correct about the ark. They're not. You can go back and read the Bible for yourself, or you can let me do it. You can see that what they talk about here is not at all associated with the Ark of the Covenant. There is no purification of self that needed to happen. There is no introspection that needed to happen. There is none of the things that are necessary for enlightenment that had to happen for any of this Ark situation. It talks about not evolving. It talks about isolation. It talks about not loving, and all of those things are real. Those things are all true. You shouldn't be doing those things. But it does not require you to join a specific club in order to do any of the things. Right? I personally am manifesting things in my life. It is not physical wealth, right? That is not what I am here for, but I am manifesting health. I am manifesting better circumstances for myself and the world. And the wealth will eventually come along with that, because God wants us to have abundance. And that is painfully clear if you read through the Bible. We are meant to follow the right path. We are to seek at every step the voice inside of us that lets us know where the right path lies. We are to seek God's face. We are to do that. You do not have to join a club to be a part of anything. You don't have to hit subscribe on my channels to watch my videos. You don't have to go to church to be saved. And you don't have to be a Mason to do the things that they're talking about in this book. All right, let's get into chapter 6, Knights of the Holy Grail. Before starting to take up the study of the Grail legends, it will be well for all who are interested to read those tales that are now listed under the heading of Children's Fairy Stories. For example, the story of Good King Arthur and his Round Table is a cosmic myth. And while there is little doubt that he, as a man, also lived, the real mystery, as in the story of the Christ, is not the literal tale, but the great mystic or occult truth that it concealed under allegory and parable. It is the same with the story of Parsifal, which can never be really understood and appreciated until the student sees in the knight and later king of the sacred cup his own spiritual development and the temptations he must also master if he would become a king of the Grail. The stone and the sword. Whoever can draw this sword from the stone is the master of the universe. In Lohengrin, also the same truth is shown to the world. It is the path of initiation along which each must pass on his road to self-mastery. To every nation and in every tongue, sacred legends have been given to teach man the path he must follow. The blind Homer of the Greeks, who told of the wanderings of Ulysses, gave the same great truths to the world. The skalds of ancient Norway and Sweden and the prophets of the Jews used the same means. And everywhere from the sacred books of the East to the legends of the American Indians, we find one great connected truth, told to many different people in ways that were best suited for their development. Such a truth is the legend of the Round Table given to King Arthur as a wedding gift. All true students know what wedding that was. Not of earth, but the wedding of the spiritual and intellectual within the initiate himself, when the spirit and the body are united eternally, each swearing to honor and protect the other. Of such a marriage was the union of Arthur and Guinevere in the legend of the king. Let us first of all consider the coming of the Arthur the king. We read in the legend of Arthur regarding Merlin the magician, the wise man who it is said had charge of the coming king during his youth. Merlin represents the hand of the elder brothers, who, realizing that a great ego had come into the world, had consecrated themselves to the work of preparing him for his mission. The Rosicrucian rose. In this flower, which was painted upon the center of King Arthur's table, we see the soul of a man, which, through purification and service, has blossomed out with all the grandeur of the initiate. It was under the direction of Merlin, the mastermind, that the anvil and stone with the sword thrust into it were raised in the square of the city when it became necessary for a new king to be selected. It was he also who called all of the brave knights of the country and told them that the one who could draw forth the sword would be king of all the land. And of all the knights in the land, Arthur, the half-grown boy, was the only one who could release the sword. There is a very wonderful mystery of the soul contained within that divine allegory. Let us read the letters that were engraved upon the sword. Whoso pulleth out this sword, of this stone and anvil, is rightwise king, born of England. The cube stone is the body. It has been so symbolized for centuries. And today, among the Masons, the ashlar is the symbol of man. Experience is the anvil, and it is upon this anvil that the sword is tempered. The sword is spirit, and he who would be king in the true spiritual sense of the word must first show his divine power by freeing the sword of spirit from the casings of lower man and the world. It is the same symbol as that later used by Sir Galahad, the guileless knight, the personification of the purified man who comes without a sword, but who later arms himself with the sword of spirit that he draws from the cube block which was floating down the river of life past Camelot. Sir Galahad had the strength of 10 because his heart was pure, and the knight of today must follow the same path. The sacred spear. This is the spear of passion that pierces the side of Christ, the higher principle in man. But when in the hand of the pure of heart, this power can heal the very wound it caused. If you have read the story of King Arthur, you will remember how he was given Excalibur, the enchanted sword, how it came up out of the water, held by a hand draped in white. Excalibur represents light and truth, which is the weapon of the true initiate. In England, there still hangs on a courthouse wall, the round table of King Arthur. In the very center of the table is a beautiful rose painted in natural colors. This symbol is that of the Rosicrucians, the ancient alchemists, and there is a direct connection between the legend of the British king and the ancient philosophers of fire. Now let us turn our attention for a moment to the history of the Holy Grail, or the cup from which Christ drank at the Last Supper, and which was said to have caught his blood when he was dying upon the cross. Ancient legends tell us that this cup was made from a sacred stone which had been the crown jewel of Lucifer, the dynamic energy of the universe. It was said that the green stone had been struck from the crown of Lucifer by the archangel Michael during the famous battle in heaven. After the death of Christ, it is said that Joseph of Arimathea took the sacred cup and the spear of passion and carried them into a distant land. He wandered with his sacred relics through Europe and is said to have finally died, and those who came after him after many centuries of tribulation, carried the sacred relics to Mount Salvart in northern Spain, where they remained until Parsifal finally took the Grail and spear back to the east, where it is to be now preserved. It is around this cup and spear that the legends of Parsifal and King Arthur have been written, And it is through study of this fact that we are better able to understand the mystery of the Great White Lodge, of which the Round Table of Arthur and the circular temple of the Knights of the Grail is a symbol. Although we no longer have the cup as a physical symbol, it is not gone from among us. And as in the days of the old, the brave knights of the Round Table went out to fight for right, so those knights of today who belong to the Great White Brotherhood go out into the world in the name of truth and labor with mankind and seek to right the wrongs of the world. It is said that the knights of Arthur's court have always fought for virtue and purity, and so did those who rode out of Mount Savart. The Grail cup is the symbol of the creative force of nature. It is also the symbol of the human race, which is slowly learning the mysteries of creation. Within the cup is the blood of Christ, that force which is transmuting the body into soul, fast or slowly as we give it greater or lesser opportunity. In the sacred spear we find symbolized again the creative force, which in the hand of Klingsor, the evil one, wounds and causes suffering, but which, when held by the pure Parsifal, heals the very wound that it caused. A great lesson is being taught to man through these allegories, but the average person is unwilling to stop and consider them. They do not realize that they themselves are the ones whom the elder brothers of humanity must use in the fight against the forces of evil. They do not realize that the dragons and ogres of legend are their own lower natures, which they must overcome. They do not see in the hand-to-hand combat of the knights of old for a lady's hand the higher and lower man fighting for the soul within. The knight of today does not realize that the white armor that he wears is his own purified body, which is proof against all the attacks of vice and passion, but nevertheless is the meaning of the legend. His shield is truth, which is a perfect protection to the inner man. His strong right arm is the knowledge and spiritual power that he has developed within, and the sword that he uses is the spiritual light with which the pure flame of the spirit fire dispels the darkness of ignorance and the demons of lust. The sacred spear and cup which he serves are the two poles of the creative life force within, the development of which he gains as he daily serves his fellow men. Far from the uninitiated, the 12 elder brothers of mankind, sitting around the circular table of the universe, watch the knights in their battle of life. And the time comes when the student, having finished his work here, is liberated at the foot of the Grail. There the candidate stands robed from head to foot in armor of spirit and in the pure white of a body that has been cleansed. When the cloth is lifted from the sacred cup and he is illuminated by the light which would have killed him had he seen it without purification, he then takes his place among the knights of the Round Table and joins those who give up all and labor for humanity. When, in sickness and in suffering, we beg of the great unknown that he send us help, then indeed our knight comes to us as Lohengrin comes to Elsa. When our loved ones pass into the great unknown, there stands the brother of the Grail, the invisible keeper, who through days of labor has earned the right to become a member of the great band of servers who gather around the table of the king, and while their bodies are still asleep in labor, in their great search for light and truth, and pray for the day when they should also become knights, kings of the Holy Grail. And so ends chapter 6. And again, we have a whole lot here, right? We have them, once again, trying to force themselves into a story that has nothing to do with them. Much like the Ark, the Holy Grail is misunderstood. Now, what they are trying to do here is personify the Holy Grail as you. And that is a noble thing because in large part it works. But where do these mysteries and histories come from? This is not in the Bible. Did you pull this from an extra biblical source? What was it? Name it. Give it to me. I want to read it. Because I don't have this in the Bible, right? We don't have them catching the blood of Christ in a glass. That's not a thing that happened in the Bible, right? They drank at the Last Supper, and that's a thing. And it says, "This is my blood," which we talked about. But there was no blood sacrifice ever necessary. Like, not a single one ever in the history of ever has ever been necessary for salvation. Not a single blood sacrifice ever. And so the capture of blood is not a good thing. The wanting to improve my soul and be a knight for humanity, that's a good thing. I'm going to have to reread the Tale of Arthur because it's been a while, right? It's been like 30 years since I read that book or that story. I'm not sure if it's even a book. Like, it's been a long time. But I don't remember them being all perfect. I remember there being some trials. I remember Arthur's wife running off with one of the knights. I remember there being a lot of strife and contention. I remember there being adversaries. I don't remember it being this holy, great thing. Now, I understand that the allegory in the story does indeed mirror this, but I don't think that the history here is right. Again, show me, right? Show me the proof that that tabletop on the wall is actually from Arthur. That's going to be difficult. I get it. But we can't put a time on Arthur. We can't say he reigned from this date to this date. We can't do that, right? It is beyond our recollection. Now, there are people who say that, well, it happened in the Dark Ages, and there are people who say it happened this time, and it happened at that time, and I believe that it's probably prehistoric, right? Before we have the histories that we have now, I believe that there were civilizations prior to ours. I believe that our view of history has been skewed. There has been great mistruths given to us in the name of science. They refuse to look at science, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, you should check out Suspicious Observers. They can clue you in a lot better than I can for a lot of the things. The story of Arthur and pulling the sword from the stone and all of that was a story. It may have been history. It may not have been history, and you can take allegories out of any single book ever written. I have the Stormlight Chronicles, right? I'm reading now. It is by Brandon Sanderson. If you're a fan of fantasy, you should definitely check it out, although he is only just now about to release book 5, which is halfway through the series, so we got a ways to go. But you can read all kinds of allegories into that story about how we should act. But it's fiction. There are other books that do the same thing. The Wheel of Time tells you a lot about actual life. It is allegory, but it is not truth. Arthur can or cannot. Like, it doesn't matter to me either way. There is a story there, an ideal to find and to hide, but to intimate that you know it is truth. And not only that it is truth, but that it contains a greater spiritual truth. And then to not lay it out plainly, right? Now, to me, again, the Grail is you, right? You are filled with God's light, right? The Grail is also, much like the Ark of the Covenant was intimidated to be, the third eye, right? It is, you have to pass through the trials of the lower part in order to activate the powers in the upper part. It's just part of it. There's not necessarily full truth in this. There is not necessarily full truth in any of them. Always take any story with a grain of salt, right? If you have not lived it, then you don't know it is truth. Make sure that you don't get tied down into these rituals and ceremonies and tools, right? They are good. You can use them if you are properly aligned and you are doing things with the proper alignment. It doesn't matter what your ceremony is, right? As long as you're not, ritually sacrificing. But if you are doing a ceremony from the Methodist or the Baptist, both of which have ceremonies, or the Catholic or the Episcopalian, which have ceremonies, or if you're a Mohammedan or you're a Buddhist, which have ceremonies. If you are doing the ceremony in accordance with the 8 laws of creation, then you are going to manifest the things that you need to. It doesn't matter what the ceremony is. Don't get tied down into the ceremonies. All of these groups really want to tie you into their ceremony because they want you part of their group. That is a perfectly understandable thing. It is not necessarily nefarious. Some groups are nefarious, not all of them. I don't believe that the Masons are. I believe that by and large, the Masons are a group doing this. They are striving and intending to make themselves and their compatriots better than they were. That is noble. That is what we are supposed to do with our lives all the time anyway. Just don't get tied down into thinking that you have to follow this specific path. God is very, very accommodating. He will find you where you are. You don't have to proclaim a specific faith in order to have God's favor in your life. That's going to step on some toes. And again, I don't do it intentionally. But it is not something that I apologize for because it is the truth. Next up, this one's probably going to be just as interesting because we started this book with a lot of good knowledge. Right? There are things hidden there that you can definitely take out. And these last 2 chapters have been the same way. There are things in it that you can take out. Doesn't mean that every single part of it is right. Right? I try my best to be honest with you. Right? I have the 300% honesty policy. I'm 300% or 100% honest with myself. I'm 100% honest with God, and I'm 100% honest with my crew. Because I believe that if we can focus ourselves in the correct manner and do the things that we are being told to do, right? Not necessarily believing all of the stories that go along with it, but to grab the underlying secret, which is love works. And if we take that and we align ourselves correctly and we get ourselves energetically balanced and we do all of the things that we're supposed to do, it doesn't matter if you're in a club or not. Then you are in the biggest club. Right? The one of creation, the club of God, and that's the club to be in. This next one, however, back when this was being written, there was still a whole lot to learn about, and there's still a whole lot to learn about, and eventually we will get into one of these just specifically devoted to this, but for now, Chapter 7, The Mystery of the Pyramid. There comes a time in the development of the occult student when he understands one of the greatest secrets of the initiates, and that is that every sacred thing outside of himself stands for some organ or function within himself. This is, of course, true in the case of the Great Pyramid, except that this particular pile of stone, said by many to be the oldest building on the surface of the earth, is the great symbol of composite man. In other words, it stands for man as a unit. Let us first consider it simply from the exterior standpoint. When we first look at it in the distance, it seems to be one great stone. But as we come closer, we see that it is made of thousands of smaller stones, each one carefully fitted into place. Here we see the first likeness between pyramid and man. We consider man to be a unit. But when we examine more closely, we find that he is the great number of small units, each working in harmony with the others. It is the same with everything. We take a successful life and we think of it as an entirety, but when we examine it, we find that it is a number of small achievements joined together. We will be coming back to this picture in a little bit, the cross-section of the Great Pyramid of Giza. As thousands of workmen were used in the building of the pyramid, so are the unnumbered workmen at work in the building of our bodies, which are symbolical of the same building. There are many pyramids all over the world. We find them in South America and in Mexico. We find mounds which were made to represent them among the American Indians, and in Europe and Britain we find remnants of the same things. But there is only one real pyramid in all the world. Even the others in Egypt are but copies of the Great Pyramid and were used as tombs for the pharaohs. But no body was ever found in Cheops, nor were there ever any signs that it had been so used. Now let us continue our analogy between the pyramid and man. If you will look at the accompanying illustration, you will see a pyramid lay flat, and you will notice it is made of 4 triangles laid around the base square. The 4-sided base of the pyramid represents the 4 elements of which man's bodies are composed. These are hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon, or earth, water, fire, and air. These are called the base of all things, and upon this base the 4 bodies of man are raised. each from its own element. Thus, the physical body is raised from the earth. The vital body is raised from the water, the emotional body from the fire, and the mental body from the air. Which ties into tarot, by the way. The pyramid. Here we see the pyramid laid out so that the four triangles and the square are clearly seen. This represents man once again, and the ancient pyramid is man offering his higher being upon the altar of the great fire spirit. There are 12 lines used in the drawing of the four triangles, which stand for the 12-fold constitution of man when it is complete. The threefold body, the threefold mind, the threefold soul, and the threefold spirit. It also gives us the 12 signs of the zodiac, divided into their respective groups. Out in the desert stands the Sphinx, the guardian of the threshold mentioned by Bulwer Lytton. It stands for the bodies of man, and is that strange being which must be passed before the student can go on in his development. The four fixed signs of which the Sphinx is a symbol are Taurus, the bull, Leo, the lion, Scorpio, the eagle, and Aquarius, the man, or the human head. The Sphinx. This is that mysterious being, suspended twixt heaven and earth, which has the head of a human being and the body of an animal. In other words, the Sphinx symbolizes man. I have already given you some work on the sacrum bone, and I told you that it was the grave digger's spade. Here is a picture of the head of the Sphinx and the inverted sacrum bone when it has been turned upward. We see the Sphinx in the inverted sacrum, and also in it the inverted Masonic keystone. All this is very interesting. I don't see that there. All of this is very interesting, but unless we realize the inner meaning of it, the true value is lost. But it is not chance that these things should be so. You have, most of you, heard of the dweller on the threshold, that creature built by our own actions and mistakes. Well, out on Egypt's desert it stands and bars the way to the pyramid, the temple of the higher man. And the message that it gives to the world is, I am the bodies. If you would go on to the temple, you must master me, for I am within you. The Sphinx, again, symbolizes man, with the mind and spirit of the human rising out of the animal desires and emotions. It is the riddle of the ages, and man is once more the answer. It is said that in ancient times the Sphinx was the gateway of the pyramid, and that there was an underground passage which led from the Sphinx to Cheops. This would make the symbolism even more perfect, for the gateway of the spirit is through the bodies, according to the ancients. Let us now enter the pyramid, and passing through the corridors, come to the king's chamber, as it is called. There are 3 great rooms in the pyramid which are of great interest to the student. The highest is the king's chamber, then below that is the queen's chamber, and down below the surface of the earth is the pit. Here again we find the great correlation between the pyramid and man. The 3 rooms are the 3 great divisions in man, which are seats of the threefold spirit. The lower room is the generative system under the control of Jehovah. The center room, or the queen's chamber, is the heart under the control of the Christ, and the upper room, or the king's chamber, is the brain, which is under the control of the Father. In this upper room is the coffer made of stone, the meaning of which has never been explained, but which the student recognizes as the third ventricle in the brain. It is quite certain, also, that this coffer was used as a tomb during initiation, when, as is in the case of the Masonic initiations of today, which are the remnants of the ancient mysteries, the candidate was buried in the earth and resurrected, a symbol of the death of the lower man and the liberation of the higher. It is said that Moses was initiated in the Great Pyramid, and some also say that Jesus was instructed there also. Be that as it may, we know that for thousands of years, since the time it was built by the Atlanteans, it has been the greatest temple of initiation in the world. It seems, also, that its work is not yet done, for mutely it is teaching those who will see the mysteries of creation. It is said by many that it is the original Solomon's temple, but this we know is not true, for while it may be the first and original material temple, The true temple of Solomon is the universe, the solar man's temple, which is slowly being rebuilt in man as the temple of the soul of man. That's hilarious. There is probably no point that is as important in connection with the pyramid as that of the cornerstone. On the very top of the Great Pyramid is a comparatively flat place, about 30 feet square. In other words, the true stone, which is the head of all the corners, is missing. If we look at the reverse side of the United States seal, we find again the pyramid from which the top is separated. Omar Khayyam, the Persian poet, gives us the secret of the keystone when he says, "From my base metal shall be filed a key, which shall unlock the door he house without." The value of the stone is better understood when you understand that it completes all of the triangles at once, and without it none of them are complete. The key in the cross. Upon the cross of matter that forms our bodies hangs the key to all the mysteries of creation. It is our duty to take this key and with it unlock the door that conceals from us the unknown. This is the key. This key is the spirit. Release it. This stone is the spirit in man, which fell from its high position and has been lost beneath the rubbish of the lower man. This is the true capstone that is now hidden in the pit of man's temple, and which he must exhume and place again as the true crown of his spiritual pyramid. He can only do this when he calls the thousands of workmen within himself together and binds them to the service of the higher man. There must be no traitors to murder the builder this time, and Lucifer, the one rejected by man as the devil, is the one who must, through the planet Mars, send man the dynamic energy which man himself must transmute from the fire of passion to the flame of spirit. He, then, must take the tools of the craft and cut and polish his own being into the capstone of the universal temple. It is interesting to note how the casing stones that once made the pyramid so beautiful and true were carried away to build the cities nearby. And in connection with that, it is interesting to note how the soul and body of man, the casing stones of a spiritual temple, have been sacrificed in order that he might have material things. As we look at pictures of the ancient pyramid and sphinx which have stood on Egypt's sands for ages, let us see in them our own mystery temple, made without the sound of hammer or the voice of workmen. And as we sadly think of this mighty ruin, broken by ages of neglect, let us remember our temple, and that its cornerstone is missing also, and our walls are falling with neglect. Let us learn the lesson which it teaches. Hasten to our pyramid. Hasten to perfect our pyramid. Cap it with the stone of spirit. Offer upon its altars our sacrifices to the great sun spirit, and bury our lower nature in its ancient coffer. Then, for us, its mysteries be revealed, and the sealed lips of the Sphinx give up their secrets. Where your treasure is, there will be your heart also. And that's not okay. The white Grail: service, self-sacrifice, purification, love, study. The black Grail: prosperity at others' expense, selfishness, shortcuts, mastered by appetite and comfort. Finis. The end. Okay, so I'm going to scroll back up here, and we're going to pull up the pyramid again because we got a lot to talk about here. Once again, this is man trying to explain something that he probably did not understand completely. That happens, right? We do it all the time. I might be doing it now and not even realize it, but there is something here. This box is labeled incorrectly. Let's see if I can get it a little bit bigger for y'all so we can talk about it some more. Wait, that went the wrong way. My bad. We're going to get there. I'm just trying to get it where y'all can actually see this. All right. So we have the pyramid, right? We have the four sides of the pyramid with four triangles and a base. This is not fully correct. Now, this is the king's chamber. Y'all can't see that. All right, we have at the very top, right, you have a small black triangle that is the capstone. Directly beneath that, you have what looks like a little house. That's the king's chamber. The queen's chamber is underneath, and it is set slightly towards the opening. This next chamber down, right on the baseline here, does not exist. And then this further one down does. There is a pit, this downward between the queen's chamber and this solar plexus chamber, whatever it is. That chamber extends down into the one below. Like there's a shaft that goes down. This is, in my estimation, in my conspiratorial mind, as I understand things, this is an approximation of the human. It is. It is an approximation of enlightenment. And I believe that it was placed here for a very specific reason. I believe that the ancients knew something was coming. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, there is a cycle of disasters that hit us. There is one that hits at 12,000 years and a completely different one that hits at 6,000 years. So it's a 12,000 year cycle repeating. Every 12,000 years you get a hot one, and every 6,000 or every 12,000 years from 6,000 years past that you get a wet cycle, right? So it's hot, wet, 6,000 years in between each part of the cycle, and it's 12,000 years before each repeating section. I believe that they knew that they knew that the hot one was coming, right? The wet one was the flood of Noah. The hot one was the Eden event, or Babylon. The fall of the Tower of Babel, in my estimation. I believe that they knew that that was coming, and that they had access to something that we don't, right? There are a lot of theories about how the pyramid was built. Some of them involve aliens, some of them involve giants. I'm not here to argue against either one of those. I don't know, I wasn't there. It was almost certainly not human slaves using Stone Age technology. Almost certainly. It is almost impossible for that to have happened. First off is the enormous resource sink. Now, there was nobody ever buried in here. As far as we know, nobody, no funeral trappings, nothing even slightly related to that has been found inside of here. What has been, however, was hidden secret things. We don't know when it was built, but it was obviously before any part of our records. There are records written by Socrates, written by Plato in his dialogues of Socrates, Critias and Timaeus, which I have in the Pitcast playlist. We read through those, right? This was referenced then as being 9,000 years before him, which was roughly 12,000 years. Or the timing of it in that was placed roughly 12,000 years ago from now, which would put it right before the last hot event. We're coming up on the next hot event. I believe that they had access to a technology that allowed them to do great things. Part of that I talked about in the Ark of the Covenant. I believe that was a discharge device, right? That they had the ability to mold stone. That's what they told us in Kings and in Chronicles. Solomon used the shamir and the ark to help shape the stones for the temple. That's in the Bible. And so I believe that they had the same technology here. If you go back and you read through Exodus, or if you watch while I do it, you will see that Moses came, like the story of Moses is a little bit weird, right? They are going to get rid of all of the Hebrew babies, and then they throw this one into the river, and he is rescued, and he is raised in the court of Pharaoh as a child of Pharaoh's sister. He has access to the greater mysteries that were taught in Egypt, that are recorded in other places. And then he leaves there and he goes to Midian, right? After he kills an Egyptian in defense of his people, the Jewish, he runs away and he goes to Midian, where he marries Jethro's daughter. Well, Jethro is a priest of the Midianites, and they have powers. They have things that they can do. And Moses learns those things, and he goes back to Egypt. And he uses those things he learns to free the people. Now, I understand the way that I am saying this is probably going to step on some toes too, but you haven't watched the Bible study if you're saying that. So he goes and he performs all of these miracles that he learned either in Egypt or in Midian. And he goes and he performs these things and he convinces Pharaoh to set him free. Now, the whole flight from Pharaoh is a whole different thing, right? We spent a good deal of time about how somehow, miraculously, in the middle of the night, all of the people who knew the things disappeared. And the people who were oppressed left with all of the things, right? They left with great wealth. They were told to go, and then they were chased through the desert because they were told to go. And of course, you're going to chase down the people that you tell to go. Now, we did the estimations in Exodus. There was probably 6 million people, right? Men, women, children, old, young. All of the livestock that somehow miraculously was not dead when all of the livestock was killed goes with them too. And so Egypt doesn't have anything, so they start to chase them down, and they go, and then the Israelites stop across from the mountain of Baal, and across from this mountain of Baal, the waters part, and they get to go through. There's a whole thing, right? Moses had access to something that you don't. He had access to the Egyptian priest while he was there, and then he had access to the Midianite priest before he conveniently killed all of them. And it's a funny thing. It's a really funny thing. When Moses goes back to Egypt, they kill all of the men, and then all of a sudden Egypt doesn't have their mysteries anymore. And then when they're on their way to Israel, they stop and they get a guide from the Midianites, right? Jethro's people. And they lead them through the desert, around all of the hostile places, right? They're not guided by God, they're guided by the Midianites. And then when they get where they're going, Moses sends Joshua and his people back to kill all of the Midianites. And they do. And then we lose some more of our esoteric knowledge. Imagine that. That's wild, right? Moses is responsible for 2 sources of the esoteric knowledge disappearing, but somehow his people make it out. And somehow his people have the power of the Shamir and the Ark. It's an amazing thing. You should definitely check out the Bible study. It gets a lot more interesting. Let's get back to the pyramid. And so, I believe, in my estimation, that this was a sign that they built this thing for a variety of reasons. One is, hey, there's a disaster cycle that's going to happen. They continued the religion for a very long time afterwards. If you look at Solon, right? If you look at what was written about Solon and the history that he relayed, the Egyptians were the source of a great deal of knowledge up until about the time of Moses. And then all of a sudden it disappeared and went to other places, but that's a different story for a different day. This, in my estimation, was built using the technology that Moses stole, right? The technology that functioned as the ark, that functioned as the Shamir, right? I believe that is a tool used to focus willpower. I know that sounds crazy. I'm okay with being called crazy. I believe in miracles. I believe in manifestation. I believe that all of these things are true. This dialogue right here. You have at the top the capstone, which is missing. You have the king's chamber, the queen's chamber, and then you have the lower chamber. They have the shaft descending. You have what's called the baseline right here. Let's look at this at a human perspective. You have the crown, which is the capstone. That's this chakra right here. You have the king's chamber, which is your third eye right here. You have the queen's chamber, which is right here. You have the baseline, which is your heart. And then you have your solar plexus, which is not where they have solar plexus, but it is instead this bottom chamber. You must, in order to ascend, take your baser instincts, which are from the heart down, right? It is your base, your solar plexus, and your base, your sacral, and your solar plexus, which is sustenance, sexual desire, and creative desire, and the will and the hunger to do things. And the feeding and the becoming all start right there. And you must orient them up through the shaft, past your heart, into the queen's chamber. And then you have to go from the queen's chamber and dog leg off. That is a real thing. When you get this one right here, it resides at your voice box. It touches, like, this was the chakra, right? The top right here, touches your uvula, that area right there, and then the bottom right here rests at the very bottom of your vocal cords. It's about that big. And you take this energy and you shove it up, right? You properly aligned your baser instincts. You take it up through your heart, through the intentionality of love. And then you shove it into the Queen's chamber, and you have to move it backwards. And then you shoot it up at about this angle, which is roughly 26 degrees, into the third eye. Right? If you take that energy and you pull it up and you pull it back and you shoot it in, that's how you activate your third eye. That's how you defeat the calcification. It is an intentional process. You have to do it the hard way. But once you do that, then you have access to the crown. That's what's being shown here. It is. I wish I would have pulled up the other diagram. I'm going to have to get it at some point. We will probably be doing another pyramid video at some point, but there are relieving stones in the King's Chamber between here and the crown. That is a step of 7, which is, I guess, just completely ironic, like no point whatsoever. But once you get to where you can identify this, right? You can identify this in a lot of different places. This 4-step process right here. Now, there are more than 4 steps. Getting the base in order is a 3-step process. Getting it into your heart is another process. Getting it up past your heart and into these 3, another process. Being able to push all of that out into the divine, another process. But I believe that this was their best effort to show that after the end. There is a reason why this particular information made it. Right? There was a worldwide calamity twice. And yet, somehow, these people were able to hold on to their knowledge. I believe it was through this. Now, over time, you lose knowledge. It's a thing that happens. It's called atrophy, right? And unless you are actively engaged in preserving the knowledge, then it goes away. And what happens? People start gatekeeping. They start saying, well, you're not worthy of this knowledge, and you're not worthy of this knowledge. And sooner or later, the knowledge starts to die off. Somebody doesn't share this one particular kernel of knowledge that they have, and it's gone forever. I believe that this was their attempt to make that last. I don't believe that the Sphinx was made with a human head on it, right? That was a retcon. Whatever was there would be interesting to know, because it's probably a direct representation of something. It is probably most likely a lion, which would talk about the timing when the shift happened. I believe that there's a reorientation, and that the misalignment of these 3 pyramids was to show the original alignment of the planet 12,000 years ago, right? I believe that there's going to be a 90-degree shift. Not every part of the earth gets the same full 90 degrees, though, right? It depends on where you're at. Some people, it's going to be 10 degrees. Some people, it's going to be 20 degrees. Some people, it'll be more than 90. But for most of, for the entirety of the world, it is literally just a 90-degree shift. But that changes the orientation in the stars. That changes the way that things are aligned. And this is set in a very specific way so that it mirrors Orion's belt, right? The 3 pyramids at the Plateau of Giza. Mirrors Orion's belt, but not as you look at them. It is at a slightly different angle. I believe that that was one of the things that they were using to pass along the knowledge of the cataclysms. Whether or not there's a chamber beneath the Sphinx, I don't know. That is entirely possible. It is also possible that it is not. It is more likely that it is there. I do believe that there are some emerald tablets. I don't believe that we have access to them. I for damn sure don't believe Billy Carson has anything to do with it. But there is more knowledge out there to be gotten. We will get there eventually. I think that God has been trying to show me some of it, and I am severely resistant to it for some reason. But the important part to pull out of this is that they are trying to show you the path to enlightenment, but not necessarily the correct one, right? And by correct, I mean they add things that don't have to be there, right? You don't have to be a Mason. You don't have to have been initiated by anybody. You can do the things yourself and to get to where you want to be. This book is a guidebook. If you have the keys, right? We talk about the keys in the other videos. We talk about the keys in this video. They're keys to knowledge. Things that once you know them, you see them everywhere. The 4-step process of enlightenment past the heart, that is one of those things that shows up in a lot of places. But the 7-step pattern shows up everywhere. Right? It's not necessarily in here other than in the relieving part, but there is a 7-step process in the purification. It's 8 steps, but the 8th is the start of the new one, right? We will be getting into that some more. I'm working on a presentation here. It's got a lot to go into it, and I want to get it just right, so it's going to be a little while. But it is going to talk about some of these things too. There is 7 points that you have to get aligned correctly in order to do the things that we talk about here. There is things you can do. Or there are things you can do. That would be a better way. You have to be able to put in the work. You have to take the commitment for yourself. There is no get there quick. There isn't. And if you try, it will backfire on you. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up here. If there is different books that you would like to see, let me know down below. I am going to try and get to them. But if you like what I'm doing here, let me know. Well, hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment, not too much confusion, to a set of somewhat difficult topics. If you have questions, comments, concerns, let me know down below. If you have something you want me to dig into, let me know down below. If you like what I'm doing, hit me with all the bells and whistles. Like, share, sub, throw me a comment. If you agree or disagree, as long as it remains respectful, I will allow it to stay up. And I am here really to try and help you understand these things. I know these things. It is hard for me to relay things because I know them, right? It is hard for me to remember the things that people don't know. We have a tendency to assume that everybody else is at our level of understanding, and that is simply not true for almost everything. Very few people have commensurate levels of understanding. I am trying, in my best way, to show the path of true enlightenment. It is a path of discipline. It is not a path of willy-nilly. It is something that you have to walk intentionally. It is something that you have to spend your time and your energy in. But you can do it. You don't need any specific group. You don't have to say any particular prayers. You don't have to do any particular, like, even the things that I am saying, you may find a different way. I'm merely relaying the ways that have worked for me. I can use my third eye. I do have access to divine. Do I use that to make myself rich? Absolutely not, right? But I do use that in manifestation. I do. It works. I am able to talk, right? I've been talking for a long time, so my voice is really down right now. But the fact that I can sit here and talk to you, this is amazing. You don't even understand how much of a manifestation it is to be able to talk in your own voice when you haven't been able to. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment, not too much confusion. If you like what I'm doing, let me know. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. This has been Pit State. Peace.